Merida Asra, Rabbi Jeremy Lawrence, Emeritus Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs, Sue and Leo Noé, and members of the Noé family, Matthew Miller, publisher of Koren Publishers, Rabbi Meini Evan Levine, Evan Steinsaltz, Executive Director of the Steinsaltz Center, Michael Goldstein, President of the United Synagogue, Rabbi Leitner, Shimon Gillis, and all the members of the Koren team and the Kinlos team who put together tonight's event, rabbis, rebbitzins, ladies and gentlemen. I'm both honored and saddened to be here this evening. Honored because what greater honor can there be to be asked to teach Torah, but saddened because it is because our chief rabbi, Ephraim Mervis, has had to depart suddenly for South Africa, where his father is so seriously ill. We join him in wishing his father a refuah shlema b'karov. I'm delighted to be part of this event, celebrating the culmination of the Noé edition of the Koren Talmud Bavli. I've long been an admirer of the works of Koren. I had the privilege of working together with Rabbi Lord Sachs in producing the Minhag Angliar edition of the Koren Magzorim. The Noé edition of the Koren Talmud Bavli is a wonderful addition to the world of Torah scholarship. And as has been mentioned already, as we saw in the video by Rabbi Lawrence, there are so many dimensions of this new edition of the Talmud that we're able to enjoy. And its publication over the past 7 years has facilitated the study of Talmud for so many more people. A yasher kochachem to you, Leo and Sue, for having sponsored this wonderful project. Leo, I'm not sure if you remember, but you and I have a connection with Talmud that goes back many, many years. We were both Talmud students together in the Stanford Hill branch of Eitz Chaim Yeshiva in the 1960s under Rabbi Angel and Rabbi Schechter. I'm taking the text that Rabbi Mervis has prepared. Obviously, I can't replicate what he would have said, but nevertheless, we can study some Talmud together. So on page 1, our sugya begins from the Darim, page 62a. But before we dive into our text, we need some background, the sort of thing that you would get from the Koren edition of the Talmud. Some historical background and some social background as well. So we need to look at harvest, page 4 in our books. We first need to understand that harvest time in the land of Israel in Talmudic period was a busy time, with fruit being gathered and stored. And different methods of harvesting applied to different fruits. Figs were plucked from the tree and then pressed into rounds and trimmed with knives to make them more convenient for storage. And it simply wasn't economical for the farmer to go after every last piece of fruit. When a farmer put away his trimming knives, it was a sign that any fruit that was left out there in the field on the trees was ownerless, was hefker, and anyone was available who wanted to come and enjoy themselves would be allowed to do so. Rabbi Tarfon, who was he? He was one of the leading scholars of the generation after the destruction of the temple. In fact, he was a young man during the time of the temple. He was also a Kohen. He was a contemporary and colleague of Rabbi Akiva, and a number of his colleagues were executed as martyrs for teaching Torah. Scholars speculate as to whether Rabbi Tarfon himself met his end in that way or not. Now to our sugya, the first of the texts. Rabbi Tarfon ashkecheyahu gavra bizman shehukpelu hamukzuos dechaochim achte besakom ushkole va'amtiyei lemishtei benaro amaloi oi loi letarfon shezeh hargo shomahu gavro sheshvake va'arak Amar Rabbi Vo mishum Rabbi Hanania ben Gamliel kol yomav shel oisei tzadik hoyim itzta'er al dovazer Amar oi li shenishtamshi bechisrei shel Torah. The Talmud relates an incident regarding Rabbi Tarfon. A certain man found Rabbi Tarfon eating figs from his field at the time when most of the knives had been set aside. He placed Rabbi Tarfon in a sack, lifted him up, and carried him and threw him to the river. Rabbi Tarfon said to him, "Woe to Tarfon, for this man is killing him." When that man heard that he was carrying the great Rabbi Tarfon, he left him and fled. Rabbi Avau said in the name of Rabbi Hanani ben Gamliel, all the days of that righteous man, Rabbi Tarfon, he was distressed over this matter, saying, "Woe is me, for I made use of the crown of Torah," as Rabbi Tarfon was only released out of respect for his Torah learning. So Rabbi Tarfon has availed himself of the permissibility of eating figs from a field that is not his own, at a time when the knives have been put away, meaning that anyone can come and help themselves. However, the owner of the field doesn't see it that way. He stuffs Rabbi Tarfon into a sack and is about to toss him into the river, where Rabbi Tarfon will surely drown. What does Rabbi Tarfon do? What would you do? The normal expectation is that someone is furious with me for taking his figs, then offer to pay him. Take out your wallet. Hey, take something. Leave me alone. Here's £50. Don't throw me into the river. Instead, Rabbi Tarfon announces who he is. Woe to Tarfon, for this man is killing him. Now, you didn't need to say you were a Torah scholar. It's like the story of the Jewish mother with her son at the beach, a son of whom she is very proud. He's recently passed his medical exams, and with minutes of entering the sea for a swim, he gets pulled under by a huge wave, and trying to get someone to come to his assistance, she screams, "Help, help, my son, the doctor is drowning." The Sugya tells us that for the rest of his life, Rabbi Tarfon regretted having made use of his name and reputation that way. We can speculate as to why he did it and why he was so upset afterwards. As we mentioned before, a number of his colleagues had been martyred for teaching Torah. And here he is, being tossed into the river over a confusion about a few figs. How ignominious. Our reactions under times of stress, under times of crises, reveal deep things about us. A few weeks ago on Yom Kippur, we were saying the Al-Chet. And the last Al-Chet in that list is Al-Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'timhon levav, for the sin we have committed before you, for confusion of heart. One of the explanations of timhon levav, confusion of heart, means it's getting our priorities wrong at a time of crisis. If you're on board a ship and suddenly there's the call to abandon ship and run for the lifeboats, if in your hurry and your panic you forget about the person you were having a drink with in the bar before lunch, that's understandable. That's forgivable. But if you forget to worry about what is happening to your wife or your kids, that's inexcusable. Some things ought to be so hardwired, even in time of crisis, that they're still at the top of our consciousness. Rabbi Tarfon is devastated that for the rest of his life, that at a time of crisis, instead of addressing the angry farmer's needs and offering him some money, he emphasized that he was a Torah scholar who should be given special privileges. But let's step back for a minute and look at the values of exploiting a Torah scholar going forward. So our next text reads, "V'omar Rabba bar Rav Chana omar Rabbi Yochanan, kol hamishtamish bekisrei shel Torah neka min ha'olam, kal v'chomer, u'ma Belshazzar shenishtabish b'chli kodesh nasu klicho, shenem avovo foritzim v'chileluam, kevon sheportzum nasu chol, neka min ha'olam, dichsiv bo b'leilo ketzil Belshazzar. המשתמש בכסרו של תורה שהוא חי וקיים לעולם ועד על אחס כמה וכמה." And with regard to this statement, Rabbi Bar Chana said that Rabbi Yochanan says, "Whoever makes use of the crown of Torah is uprooted from the world." And this can be derived by means of an a fortiori inference of Kal V'chomer. If Belshazzar, who makes use of the sacred temple vessels, which had already become non-sacred vessels by that time, as their forces were removed from the temple, the vessels lost their sanctity, as it is stated in the verse, "And robbers shall enter it and profane it," showing that once the temple vessels have been robbed, they become non-sacred, was uprooted for the world for his actions. As it is written, on that night Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. One who makes use of the crown of Torah, which endures and lives forever, and whose sanctity cannot be removed, all the more so he should be uprooted. So Rabbi Barbara Chana says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, making use of the crown of Torah for personal gain makes you liable to being uprooted for the world. That is, that person will suffer an untimely or unnatural death. And maybe that was going through Rabbi Tarfon's mind after he uttered the words, woe to Tarfon, and being thrown into the river was an untimely end. And the Talmud derives this by means of a kal vachomer. Belshazzar, who makes use of the temple vessels in his famous feast, and now to make an inappropriate use of a temple vessel is the sin of me'ilah, misappropriation. However, these vessels will no longer have the sanctity of the Klei Bet HaMikdash. The very act of plundering them had deconsecrated them. Nevertheless, Belshazzar is still punished because of their historic significance. So what they once were. So here's the Talmud's argument. If Belshazzar was punished for using once upon a time sacred vessels for an improper purpose, how much more should someone be expected to be punished for using Torah, which retains its sanctity for all time, for an improper purpose? Your Torah is to be used to inspire people, to teach people, not as a get-out-of-jail card. The Talmud now returns to analyze the story further. We've taken it for granted that we're dealing with an angry farmer, but why? And we discover there's a layer to this story we hadn't known before. So at the top of page 5, Rabbi Tarfon, kiven de ochel de hukveloi rova mikzois hava, a mai tzari hau gavro, mishum to have a gonve le inve kulashato. Vechevon de ashkoche le Rabbi Tarfon sova, ha hainu de gonvam. Ihochi a mai tzia nafshe, mishum de Rabbi Tarfon osher godel hava, so the Talmud returns to the incident involving Rabbi Tarfon. And in the case of Rabbi Tarfon, since he was eating during the time when most of the knives had been set aside, why did that man trouble him? The Gemara explains it's because someone had been stealing grapes from that man all year. And when he found Rabbi Tarfon, he thought, this is the man who stole from me the entire year. So the Gemara asks, if so, why did Rabbi Tarfon berate himself? Clearly, he was justified in saving himself. And the Gemara answers, since Rabbi Tarfon was very wealthy, he should have sought to appease him with money in order to save himself, rather than relying on his status as a Torah scholar. So we discover now that this farmer had been suffering. His grapes had been stolen. I've now found the ganef. But if that is the case, surely there's nothing wrong with Rabbi Tarfon and in defending himself in this way, revealing his identity as a Torah scholar. It is one thing to criticize Rabbi Tarfon for claiming special privileges for munching a kilo of figs. If this guy is annoyed with you, then pay him off. It's quite another to expect Rabbi Tarfon to compensate this farmer for the loss of his grape harvest. And yet the Talmud says, yes, Rabbi Tarfon was an extremely wealthy man. It would have been no difficulty for him to compensate the farmer for all his losses, rather than to come to claim privilege because of his status as a scholar. So now we have a more nuanced picture. Halachically, it would have been permitted for him to exploit his reputation rather than having to compensate the farmer for his extensive losses. However, Rabbi Tarfon realizes that a scholar of his standing and reputation ought to go beyond the letter of the law. He is upset with himself for not having the presence of mind to offer the man as much money as he wanted, rather than to claim his position as a Talmid Chacham. Our Sugya takes it for granted that we can't use the crown of the Torah for personal gain. But how far does this go? So our next text tells us, Tanya, la'avo es Hashem Elokecha lishmo b'kol dov kavoy, shelo yom ha'odom ekre shikre'eni chacham, eshne shikre'uni Rabbi, ashanein sheheye zokim ve'eshe b'yeshiva. Apropos the story of Rabbi Tarfon's regret for gaining personal benefit from his status as a Torah scholar, the Gemara cites similar teachings. It is taught in a Braita, the verse says, to love the Lord your God, to listen to his voice, and to cleave to him. This verse indicates that a person should not say, I will read Torah, so they will call me a sage. I will study Mishnah, so they will call me rabbi. I will review my studies so that I shall be an elder and sit in the academy. It is clear that I might diverge from the Koren translation and translate Ashanein as I will study Talmud. Rather, Ella lemad me ahava, learn out of love, v'sof hakavod lavoy, shenema koshrema letzboisecha, kosveima luach libecha, v'omer drochecha darchinoam, v'omer eitz chaim hil machazin kibot v'somecheho mu'ushah. Rather, learn out of love, as the verse states, to love the Lord your God, and the honor will eventually come of its own accord, as it is stated, bind them upon your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. And it states its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. And it states is a tree of life to those who grasp it, happy is everyone who holds it fast. Consequently, one who studies in order to master Torah for its own sake, as reflected in the verse, bind them upon your fingers, will eventually find and merit pleasantness, peace, and happiness. So it's very clear that our sugya is rejecting the notion of someone like me, a professional rabbi, who is paid to teach Torah, and you need to teach and study Torah for its own sake and not for any other motive. And the next passage takes this further. At the top of page 6, Rabbi Eliezer bar Tzadok Omer, Asei devorim l'shem po'olam, v'daber lohem lishmam, al ta'asein atzora his gadol bohem, v'al ta'asein kordam liyos oidebroi, v'kal v'chomer, u'ma Belshazzar shel nishtamesh ela b'chlei kodesh shenasu klei chol, ne'ka mino olam, hamishtamesh b'chosrei shel Torah, b'chisrei shel Torah, alachas kama v'kama. Rabbi Eliezer bar Tzadok says, do the things for the sake of their performance, not for any ulterior motive, and speak words of Torah for their own sake. Do not make them a crown with which to be glorified, and do not make them a dolabra, a kardom, a type of axe with which to hoe. I do not use Torah study as a means of earning a livelihood. And this is a fortiori inference if Belshazzar, who made only use of sacred vessels to become non-sacred, was uprooted from the world. One who makes use of the crown of Torah, whose sanctity is permanent, all the more so, he should be uprooted from the world. So using the crown of Torah for the sake of kavod, honor, using it as a kordon, a type of versatile axe. I realized if I'd open a volume of the Noé Talmud, I would see a picture of it. So I came here this evening, and there it was, some nice illustrations, precisely as we would come to expect of what the kardon is in Roman times. And if you use the Torah like this as a means of livelihood, this is wrong. And again, the Kal Vachomer from Belshazzar, his misuse of no longer sacred vessels, but once sacred vessels led to a sticky end. How much more should we not use a Torah roll for our honor or parnasah? But we have to contextualize this Gemara. Historically, it is true. The rabbis were not professional scholars taking a stipend from the community to teach Torah and render rulings. They were farmers, shoemakers, blacksmiths, etc. Rambam Moses Maimonides, in his Laws of Talmud Torah, codifies this passage and states that it is forbidden for a Torah scholar to accept any payment or gift that is offered to him on account of his Torah scholarship. You cannot take a stipend from the community to devote yourself to your studies. You must support yourself. If someone else wants to support you, that is another matter. Ramban himself was supported by his younger brother David, who was a merchant. When his brother died following a tragedy at sea, that is when Rambam took up the profession of medicine to support himself and became the court physician to the Sultan in Egypt. He writes in a famous letter how exhausted he was after a day's work at the palace to have to address the needs of the Jewish community when he returned home in the evening. However, the position of other authorities is different. Rabbi Yosef Karo, amongst others, writes that without financial support for the scholars, Torah would be lost and forgotten. And that is the accepted position today. Nevertheless, in every generation, there have been individual scholars who have had the independent means and have not availed themselves of this heter permissibility to take from the community. But even in the time of the Talmud, when a Torah scholar was not a professional, that does not mean he was not without privilege. There is such a thing as kavod haTorah, showing honor and deference to a Torah scholar, due respect to his scholarship. And as our passage continues, Omar Rovo, Shorele le'inshe le'oduye nafshe ba'aswe de lo yadele, dichsiv va'avdecha yerei es Hashem min urov, elo kashle de Rabbi Tarfon, oshegod loyam, ba'havele le'faisim edomim. Rabbi says it's in a time of need, it is permitted for a person to make himself known at a place where people do not know him and tell them he's a scholar. The proof is what from Obadiah said to Elijah in order to identify himself, as it says, as it is written, but I, your servant, had feared the Lord from my youth. The Gemara asks, was this difficult, therefore, with regard to Rabbi Tarfon, who was distraught because he revealed his identity to the man who placed him in the sack? The Gemara answers, the case of Rabbi Tarfon is different, as he was very wealthy and should have sought to appease him with money. The Steinsaltz translation has interpolated the phrase in time of need here. That's not in the original. I'm not sure what the translator was aiming at, but it seems to me that the Gemara is saying the Torah scholar may reveal his identity in order to claim the rights to which he is entitled by law. The Gemara, following the passage that we have here in our booklet, tell us that there are certain privileges that to the Talmid Chacham, the Torah scholar, has, just as there are privileges to a Kohen and a Levi. For example, after you've called up a Kohen and a Levi to the Torah, it is a Torah scholar who should be called next. Other instances, if the Torah scholar is in need of having his case heard in court, he should be fast-tracked, so that he could spend as little time as possible away from his studies. So Rabbi is saying that in revealing his identity is not considered exploiting his position, but simply claiming his due. And the proof is from Obadiah. Obadiah was a servant of King Ahab, and Elijah asked Obadiah to tell Ahab that he, Elijah, wished to deliver a message to him from God and wishes to arrange to meet him. Obadiah is scared. Elijah is a wanted man. And if for some reason Elijah is not there at the rendezvous, Ahab will have Obadiah killed. He pleads to Elijah that he has been a God-fearing man, a person of righteousness, and rather than modestly hide his identity and he exploits the fact that he is revealing himself to Elijah so as to be saved by harm. But then our Gemara counters with the obvious question. If in order to reveal your identity to save yourself from harm, why is Rabbi Tarfon so hard on himself? The answer is because he is exceptionally wealthy. He should have used those means first. It is one thing for the poor scholar to be able to own up that he's a Talmid Chacham, so he's fast-tracked in litigation. The millionaire scholar doesn't need that. Our final citation modifies the circumstances where you can speak up about your scholarship. Rava Romi, Kesiv v'avdecha yorei es Hashem min urav, u'chesiv yaharucho zor v'lo ficha. Ha ba'asre de yodilei, ha ba'asre de lo yodilei. Rava raises a contradiction. It is written that Obadiah spoke highly of himself, but I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. And it is written elsewhere, let another praise you, and not your own mouth. And he answered by saying, one is referring to a place where people know him, where he should not praise himself, and the other verse is referring to a place where people do not know him. Where you are known, let others praise you. For you to do so yourself is simply boastful. Where you are not known, your mouth can praise you and appropriately inform them of your status. So friends, what emerges here is that the Torah scholar has to act with responsibility. Even if today he can use Torah as a means of livelihood, as the kardom, he still has to be very careful with the crown of Torah. The honor due to the Torah scholar is not because of who he is, but of what he represents. Rabbi Tarfon was upset for the rest of his life because of one incident of exploitation of the crown of Torah. It is a humbling lesson for all of us. The Noé edition of the Koren Talmud is enabling more and more people to access that crown of Torah. May those who come forward to wear it do so with pride and grace. Thank you.